Hey everybody, it's the Jake of Trades, and you're watching another episode of the Dungeon Master Master Class. And today we are going to talk about tournaments. In the last session that I played with my friends, our Pathfinder D&D game, there was a coronation happening, and it was a really big deal. And so I wanted to kind of emphasize that it was a big deal by having a tournament take place just outside the city walls. I had never done a tournament in game before, and I was actually pretty excited to do it to kind of just display to the players that there was like it was a big deal, and that a lot of people were competing. There was different events, and that it was just like a big thing. And so, I mean, I've never done one of these before, so I had to come up with some rules on how to do those. And I'm going to share those with you now because they're pretty quick and easy, and it will allow you to perhaps allow your players to partake in a tournament in your game. So there were three different events that they could try to enlist in. There was a just a general melee where people were fighting with swords against each other. There was an archery contest where they were shooting at targets, and there was also, of course, jousting. I mean, you got to have jousting, right? So those were the three events that they got to choose from, and unfortunately, no one went for the jousting, but that's a story for another video. I want to tell you just what the rules that I created are so that you have the opportunity to use them. Let's start first with the melee because that was the first one that the players decided that they were going to try to do. Um, First things first, they were given just the same armor and the same swords that everyone else was wearing. This was really important because my players have accrued some really nice weapons and armor, and I didn't want them to take advantage of that in the melee. And also because, we're not trying to kill people. This is just a tournament for sport. And so I didn't want them to accidentally kill somebody with their live steel. So I gave them all blunted blades, or the two who were participating got blunted swords. Yeah, blunted weapons. They don't cut really. And then they were given the exact same armor, essentially. It was just a hide armor. You could use whatever you wanted, but I thought hide would be good because it provides a little bit of protection without, making it impossible to hit somebody. Just a +4 bonus to AC. So then they were squared off against their opponents, and I put them only like 5 feet apart, and that was just more so that we didn't have to worry about managing the grid combat. We could just do theater of the mind. So I just said they were 5 feet apart, so it's nothing to just step up and take a swing at each other. The rounds started. You rolled initiative and they rolled initiative, and whoever rolled higher got to go first. And then it was just you guys just like they beat the shit out of each other. They just swung their swords with their normal attack bonuses, and if they hit, they dealt damage. I gave each opponent. I did a tier structure. A lot of times in these melees, they would just throw like everybody in the ring together, and the last person standing would win. But like I said, I wanted this to be kind of easy. I didn't want to take it. It would take forever if I were to do it that way. So I just did like brackets, and there was like a couple different brackets, and then they fought against each other until it was like the two finalists facing off against each other. They swing at each other, and if they hit, then they deal their damage, which is just 1d8 plus their strength. The kicker that I thought of, this would be make it kind of a little more interesting. I allowed for criticals to do damage. Like any damage they do is going to be non-lethal damage, but on a critical blow, I said that, hey, that's going to be lethal damage. So if someone was looking really beat up and then you managed to land a critical blow, there's a really good chance that you straight up kill that guy. I thought that would make it kind of interesting, and it kind of did. It made for just to spice things up a little bit, make the stakes just a little bit higher without putting a whole lot of more work on my end of things. So that worked out pretty nicely. And you can do however many brackets you want. I figured it was like like 3 or 4, and that way there's like 4 rounds of combat, and then a winner is declared. Moving right along, we go then to the archery competition, and I set that up the exact same way. I know a lot of the times it would just you would line people up or something, or at least that's how it's displayed a lot of the time in like popular culture, is that they would just line all of the archers up, and then they would all shoot an arrow at their own target at the same time, and whoever got the closest on the inside of the target moves forward. But I thought it would be more interesting, a little more dynamic, if I kind of made that like bracketed combat as well. So that's what I did, and I did it the exact same as the melee, like 4 tiers, and then a championship round or something, or 3 tiers and then a championship round. I forget. But anyway, it worked out pretty well. It was that one was a little more interesting. It took a little bit more figuring out how to do that. But essentially, there was like a big hay target, and then there was like a circular target on the target. And so if you managed to hit the target, you didn't necessarily get points. If you were too far outside of like the actual target on the hay bale, then you didn't get any points. But so it was like a bullseye sort of thing, with different like concentric rings moving inwards. So if you got a 0 to a 10 on your attack roll, you didn't score any points. Depending on how bad you shot, you didn't even hit the target. If you got an 11 to a 13, you scored 1 point. I'm going to try to show a little picture up over here too, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. If you got a 11 to a 13, you got 1 point. If you got a 14 to a 15, that was a +2, 2 points. 16 to 17, 3 points. 18 to 19, 4 points. 20 to 21, 5 points. And then a 22 up was essentially a bullseye, and that was worth 6 points. Also, I kind of wanted to extend the same sort of thing where criticals were like a little more dynamic and a little more interesting. And so I said that if you got a 19 or a 20 on the die, that was also just a bullseye, like automatically. You don't even have to worry about figuring in the details. The two people who competed in the archery competition were using short bows, and I said that the targets were like 90 feet away, which meant that it was out of range for them, and so they were taking penalties on every shot they took. And so I figured, like a 19 to a 20 is kind of like throwing them a little bone. They don't necessarily have to score a 22 on their attack just to get a bullseye. But with a 19 or 20, I think it probably would be a bullseye anyway. So, but anyway, I mean, that's the really cool thing about this, is that the archery competition is that you can, that's like a slider scale. You can move it around so that, if you have a lower level players who are competing in this archery competition, you could, kind of knock those down a little bit. And that way it was a little bit easier for them to get on the board and to actually compete. So yeah, that turned out pretty well. I was pretty satisfied with how that went. And the last thing was the jousting. That was the one that no one competed in, and I was really hoping that someone would, because I feel like, jousting is just like, that's like the epitome of a tournament. When people think of like a medieval tournament, they think of jousting, right? I know I do, like every time. And so I was really disappointed that no one went for the jousting. But just because none of my players did doesn't mean none of your players will. And so I figured I should probably provide the rules for the jousting that I came up with. First of all, based on Pathfinder rules, if you are on a mount and you want to make an attack, you have to first make a DC 20 ride check to actually steer the horse in the right direction, keep it under control while you are lining up to make your attack. I gave everybody the same armor, so they were all wearing full plate armor, which is a +9 to your AC, and it also has an armor check penalty of -6. Now that means that while you are trying to ride your horse down there, you essentially need to hit a 26 DC difficulty check before you can actually make an attack. On the bright side, if you make that ride check, you are guaranteed at least 1 point. That means, okay, I got my horse under control. I can get my lance like leveled out and lined up for a nice strike on this guy. Get 1 point. If you manage to succeed your ride check, I let you take an attack roll too, but you're just always guaranteed to get at least 1 point at that point. So you make an attack roll. If you can hit their armor, then congratulations, you scored 2 points on that tilt. Good for you. And if you manage to score a critical hit, like a 19 or a 20 on the die, then that's 3 points on that tilt, on that lance, if you will. However, whatever the terminology is. And so they would take 3 of those tilts, and whoever had the most points at the end of that would advance to the next bracket, essentially. I structured it all the same way. So the jousting was also like a bracket. That one I think is supposed to be like a bracket, traditionally. So that one is the one that kind of actually made sense. The other thing that you could do, though, none of my players were really well equipped for jousting. Like, only one of them had full plate armor. None of them had horses, and none of them had lances. So if you wanted to, you could be like, hey, you can rent this armor. If you want to joust but you don't have armor, you can buy a horse, or you could rent a horse, and you would also have to buy lances if you didn't have any. And I would make them buy lances anyway, because a lance from like the player's handbook is going to be just like an actual like battle lance, battle ready. It's going to be have like a pointed end, and you can literally kill people with that. But again, this is a sportly competition, and so they weren't trying to kill people. They would have like blunted lances, and so make them buy some lances, make them spend like a bunch of gold. It's like a high risk, high reward sort of thing. They can go all in and spend a bunch of money, and just for the opportunity to possibly make a lot more money. The only other thing that I might mention on these is that I had everybody, all of the tournaments had like an entry fee. For the melee and for the archery competition, it was 20 gold to enter for an opportunity to win 100 gold. For the jousting, I was going to make it substantially more. I was going to make them like throw in 50 gold for an opportunity to win like, 300 or something like that. I thought it would just be a little more fun. Again, kind of enforcing that high risk, high reward aspect. And I think that's about it. I thought it turned out really well. 3 out of my 4 players who competed in their tournaments managed to win. The only other thing I would say is that I spaced them out. I said that the melee took there was like a different melee tournament happening like every 2 hours because it was like such a small pool of competitors. I figured, hey, give them an opportunity to perhaps compete a couple times if they want to. And I did the same thing for the archery, and I would have done the same thing for the jousting if any of them had signed up for the jousting. So just I alternated. It was like 2 hours for the melee, 2 hours for the archery. I said the jousting was happening like every hour though. And I kind of alternated them, so like the melee would start on even numbered hours and the archery would start on odd numbered hours. And that way, if they wanted to, they had the opportunity to compete in a couple of the different competitions. But that didn't really happen. They mostly just spent that time, cheering on their companions who were competing in those events before racing off to their event to start it. So I thought it turned out pretty well, though. Those are my quick and dirty rules for running like a nice little tournament for your players. Oh, one last little thing. Because I was having like multiple tournaments in the different events. I made the stipulation that you can only win one of those tournaments. So if you were competing in the melee, you could only win once. You couldn't just win and then go back and win again and keep coming back all day. Like I try to spread the love out, and also just kind of, it makes things go a little bit faster because I did have some plot stuff that I wanted to cover that session. So it made it so that they weren't spending all 5 hours at the tourney grounds just, beating the crap out of people and stuff like that. So those are my rules. I'm sorry, I tried to end this video a couple times and I remembered other things I wanted to say. But hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully this was a nice quick little video that will help you prepare for a tournament in your game perhaps. Anyway, if you liked the video, let me know. Hit the like button. If you really liked the video, leave me a comment. And if you really enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel. And also, be sure to check out our Twitch page, twitch.tv/studio48_48. And we also have a YouTube channel where we upload all of the videos. So you can you can search Studio 4D8. That's the number 4, the letter D, the number 8. And our Twitch show airs every Saturday at 5 o'clock Mountain Time. That's 4 o'clock Pacific and 7 o'clock Eastern for those of you who may be interested watching. In the meantime, keep on playing, and why don't you leave me your own ideas for tournament rules and combat and stuff like that in the description below if you have any. I'd be really interested and keen to hear those. Anything to kind of, improve things, right? We got to help each other out. All right. Have a good one, guys.